Boosteroid has just received a fantastic update for Mac users. It now supports Apple Silicon natively, so there is a native application for the M1 and M2 architecture, which means there's no translation using Rosetta from the Intel x86 architecture to 64-bit Apple architecture, which means the application is more optimized now for Apple Silicon hardware like MacBooks that run on the M1 and M2 chip variants. And this is fantastic news. This means probably better battery life and probably more stability. I'm going to be doing more testing soon, so I'll be able to see how good the battery life is with this new update. But right now, as you can see, I'm playing Overwatch. This is the new Lucio Ball game mode. Not new, but it's remixed. They released this remix last year, and yeah, I was scoring quite a few goals in this clip. I think I got like a triple goal right now, and this was on Boosteroid I was playing, so I can definitely say the performance on Boosteroid is great, good enough to play games competitively, good enough to play Lucio Ball as well, which, if you don't know, is kind of a take on Rocket League, kind of Overwatch's take on Rocket League, and it's pretty fun. Managed to get the new Doomfist skin, but yeah, Boosteroid is getting better and better, continuing to improve. And I think one suggestion I do have, it would be amazing if they added a windowed mode, so you could play in a window rather than full screen. Sometimes this is better on 4K displays because it has 1-to-1 scaling if you're running in a window, and that makes the image look a bit sharper. And also, it would be great if we could choose our server, like if we could choose to wait for a closer server, maybe if there's a queue or something, and you would optionally have it so that you can queue for your closest server, or you can get into a server immediately and that will put you on any available server. But right now, Boosteroid is really amazing. It's definitely a competitor for GeForce Now, a worthy competitor. So the battle between the cloud gaming providers is definitely taking on a new form, really taking off right now, and it will be interesting to see who emerges as the most successful cloud gaming provider. You can't write off the smaller players in this because it's a nascent industry and who knows what's going to happen. So yeah, it's amazing news, and I'll show some more of the gameplay. As you can see, this is running on Boosteroid's graphics Grid RTX 6012. It's pretty good graphics card. Defaults to ultra settings, which is great. This is on the France server I'm connecting to, and I also did manage to get the new Doomfist skin from the summer games yesterday, so I'll show you the skin. This is the new skin. It's like a tropical theme, summer theme. You can imagine he's going on holiday or something. But yeah, it's a pretty cool skin. So the rest of the video will just be the gameplay. Hope you enjoy. This was played on Boosteroid as well. I was playing on Boosteroid, so you know, people who say you can't play aim intensive heroes. I know Doomfist is not the most aim intensive, but he's pretty mechanically intensive. So you can play even mechanically intensive heroes with cloud gaming services, which a lot of people don't believe that you can, but this is the evidence that I'm showing right now. Boosteroid is good enough to give you a playable experience, even with first-person shooters like Overwatch. And it will get even better in the future when they add the 120 FPS mode, because that will further reduce the latency. Because remember, the higher your frame rate, the lower your latency, because that reduces the amount of time between each frame. There is, it's known as the frame latency, I think it's called. Frame time, it's called frame time. So it reduces your frame time. Normally at 60 FPS you can have a 16.6 millisecond frame time, but with 120 FPS I think you get something like 8.8 milliseconds, so it's a bit reduced. And yeah, you combine that with the Boosteroid latency, which I normally get about 3 milliseconds and it's very playable. Even at 10 milliseconds it would be playable on Boosteroid's side. People have argued that you can't play cloud gaming multiplayer games because you're having the double latency of going from your hardware to the cloud server and then going from the cloud server to the Overwatch or whichever game you're playing, that server that they're hosting the multiplayer game lobby on. But in practice it doesn't really make much of a difference. It doesn't add much of a latency compared with a single player game. I haven't noticed that myself. So Overwatch is very optimized as well for good latency, so it does depend on the game, I guess, but I haven't noticed a big difference between single player and multiplayer games as far as how difficult it is to control your character. And remember, you always want to use a Ethernet cable to get the best possible latency and try and upgrade yourself to fiber connection. A lot of the time fiber optic connection is cheaper than even the normal copper type of broadband deals that are around right now. The broadband that I'm using right now is only £30 per month, and that's including phone line. It's actually £20 per month that I pay. It's a 12-month contract, and it's 500 megabits down, 500 megabits up, so I have a symmetric speed, and this means that I have the same upload and download speed, so obviously I get a massive advantage in how quickly I can upload files, which is amazing, really great for uploading stuff to YouTube, even at 4K resolution, very high bitrate. I always try to make my videos the very highest bitrate possible, so that you, the viewers, get the best possible quality of gameplay as you're watching, and it's closest to how I see right now on my screen, because there's a lot of compression involved with YouTube, so you don't always get the best representation of a service by watching on YouTube. You have to experience it for yourself, and I do recommend trying out Boosteroid for yourself. Really, first do a speed test beforehand so you know you have the best connection, and remember to use Ethernet cable, and if that's giving you a good result within the range of less than 20 milliseconds and more than, say, 30 megabits per second, then you should be fine. And I 100% recommend trying out Boosteroid on your own system, especially if you're a Mac user. This is one of the few ways that we can play games without having to faff around with complicated workarounds and solutions like Game Porting Toolkit, which I don't want to downplay the progress that's been made on the Apple gaming side. It is amazing what's been done with the Game Porting Toolkit and what Apple is doing and what Crossover Codeweavers is doing with the Crossover software. But I do want to say that the complexity means that it's not always a viable solution for the average consumer. Really, the average consumer is going to be much more inclined to use a cloud gaming service where the setup is already done for you. One of the big benefits of cloud gaming is, remember, you don't need to actually interface with the operating system at all. All of the games are already pre-installed, or you can install them, and that means that you don't have to faff around with driver support and things like that as well, as you might have had to do on a Windows system. You don't need to mess around with downloading the game, you don't need to mess around with making sure that your system meets the minimum requirements. So really, cloud gaming simplifies gaming so much and really makes it so accessible to more consumers, and that's what makes it really amazing, I think, in my opinion. And I would just also add that cloud gaming is still in its infancy, so this is why we're going to see improvements more rapidly than ever before in any other kind of industry, like in the normal year-on-year improvements that we see with chip architecture. It's not going to match how much progress we see with cloud gaming, because we've seen a massive amount of progress in the past few years. Nvidia is doing amazing work, and Boosteroid is also doing amazing work with making these services available and making them better and better and continuing to improve them. So it's really, I don't really see them as competitors, I see them as complementary to each other. Like, sometimes you might want to use GeForce Now for a certain game, sometimes you might want to use Boosteroid for a certain game. I use GeForce Now sometimes if I want to play Paladins or something else like that. So sometimes I use GeForce Now, sometimes I use Boosteroid, especially when Boosteroid has a lot of the games that I don't have on GeForce Now. And Boosteroid also has the added functionality of being able to stream directly to YouTube. Remember, GeForce Now does not have that, so that's one big advantage that you have with Boosteroid. That means you don't need to have any special software, you don't need to have anything else installed on your system. It's just the just the cloud gaming software. That's all you need. And even without any software, you can even use the web browser. And you do need to use the web browser if you want to stream with Boosteroid. So I don't think you can do that on the application just yet. Hopefully they will add that into the application directly in the future. But right now, I think the application is probably the best option for just generally playing the game, because you get to see your latency and stuff like that. With the overlay on the top left, as you can see my bitrate is 23. Stream FPS is holding steady at 60 FPS. Now, sometimes if you do have any issues with the stream quality, don't write it off immediately, because these things can be fixed, and a lot of the time it is to do with how you set up your connection and your Wi-Fi, and using a wired cable can really massively improve things. But not only that, you might just have a bad day with Boosteroid, like sometimes the servers are down, and that's fine because it doesn't usually last for a long time, and usually if you get in contact with support, they will give you a lot of good advice. So don't hesitate to use the support options that are available to you. And then, as you can see in this game, we had a really hard second round. The third round, we actually came back and turned it around somehow. My team was pretty good, I have to say. But yeah, the Overwatch 2 is also having really amazing updates, getting better and better, and we have some updates on the Microsoft situation. So, as you know, Microsoft was trying to buy Activision Blizzard. So the FTC was trying to block it in America, but they actually got denied by the judge, and then they tried to appeal it, but I think the appeal got denied as well. So it's quite a complicated situation where these regulatory bodies are trying to block the deal in the UK and America. But in most of the other countries, they have approved it. I think the deal itself has advantages and it has disadvantages. We have to look at both sides of the picture. We can't just focus on one side and say, that this is the best deal ever and there's no problems at all. Because there are problems sometimes, with competition. It can be problematic having all of the eggs in one basket, basically having all of the gaming publishers owned by one big publisher. Consolidation of that kind can be harmful to the industry and the future of gaming as well, especially in 10 years time when these contracts actually end, and that gives Microsoft quite a lot of power. But in the meantime, in the short term, it does have benefits, like with the cloud gaming deals and having all of these Microsoft games, having the library available to Boosteroid is going to be amazing, and having the Activision Blizzard games, I guess that would be great for Americans, but we don't know if that's going to be, we know it's going to be worldwide, but if you're from the UK, then we don't have a concrete picture yet of what's going to happen. We know that CMA has offered to potentially divest the CMA has offered to extend its deadline to something of August, and that gives them a bit more time, gives Microsoft time to potentially address the concerns in the final report. The main concerns that the CMA raised were the cloud gaming concerns. So I think I've covered that quite a bit before, but I just want to add that, cloud gaming, it's quite an important thing. You can't just write it off and just say the CMA is completely unfounded, all of the things they're saying, because they're not completely unfounded in my opinion. They do have some basis, but you have to look at it objectively and think of both sides and really just think of what is best for the consumers. I think that the deal does have benefits, but also has some downsides for the consumers, as far as, Game Pass has just got a price increase. It's quite a pricey service. But then Game Pass does have a lot of benefits as well, like you get a lot of stuff included. But I don't really see myself subscribing to Game Pass. There's so many things that are out there that you can subscribe for. And I personally prefer when there's a lot of competition, and even in the streaming services, with the Netflix and Apple TV and Amazon Prime, some people have argued it's better to have have a monopoly on the streaming services, which is a point of view I don't really understand, because in my opinion, it's not better to have the monopoly. People have argued, you get all of your shows on Netflix. If it's a monopoly, then you don't have to keep swapping between providers, and you have all of your shows. You don't have to pay triple to get all of your shows from different providers, like from Amazon Prime and then Disney Plus and then whoever else. But in my opinion, it's better to have competition, because that means services are forced to increase their quality and reduce their costs in response to competition. Like we saw with Netflix, they gave the ad-supported tier, which meant they had to reduce the prices, and it's a similar situation with the Microsoft as well. It's not quite the same, but with streaming services, we saw how Netflix has competition from Apple TV, and Apple TV is a really amazing deal. I think Apple TV have some of the best shows right now that you can watch Some of the shows I can recommend are Servant is an amazing kind of thriller horror type of show, which is directed partly by Shyamalan, who was behind I think his name's Midnight. What was his name? Okay, I can't remember his name, but he was behind The Sixth Sense, which is one of the most highly acclaimed horror movies. Highly recommend watching The Sixth Sense if you haven't watched it. I think it was released in 1998. But yeah, I'm kind of going off on a tangent there. But yeah, that was Overwatch. Hope you enjoyed the gameplay. This was played on Boosteroid. So yeah, I've been having a lot of fun and been playing a lot of Overwatch on Boosteroid. So thank you for watching the video.